So this is your business morning, this Friday, the 11th of January. Let's continue the conversation around the top story, which is the new minimum wage. And this is coming at a time when the political environment is getting a little bit heated up with the brickbats between politicians and everyone talking tough and sometimes dirty. But let's talk. This is concerning the ordinary man. The Labour Congress says they're not going to stop their protests until the new minimum wage issue is resolved. But the key issue for the Bismarck-Rwanda is a technical advisory committee is to advise the government on where to find the money without borrowing. Paul Alaje is a development economist, and he's also senior economist at SPM Professionals. He's live to us from our Abuja studios. Paul, good morning. Yes, let's get the details of this new minimum wage. It's been a very tough road, but let's spend just about a few minutes to look at how we arrived at where we are at the moment, what you call the crossroad.
Yeah, thank you so very much. Minimum wage, or wage, as the case may be, should have been what should be decided between the demand for labor and supply of labor. Labor supply in Nigeria is indicated by the total number of persons that are joining the labor force. Most of those figures are released by Nigeria Bureau of Statistics, usually quarterly or annual basis. And from the figures coming from Nigeria Bureau of Statistics, particularly those joining unemployment figure and also the entire labor force, labor supply seems to have increased significantly. However, studying the unemployment rate or unemployment figures, it shows that perhaps there have been significant reduction in demand for labor because of companies' performance, because of reduction in number of companies, etc., etc. Those are the things that could be deduced from what is coming from supply of labor. So if you look at that carefully, you see that it might be argued using economics that it might not be proper for wage to increase at this time. However, that is using purely price mechanism. But using other methods and approach to look at minimum wage issue, we now look at economic performance, which is another way of determining whether minimum wage should be increased. So you see what has happened to inflation and at the same time what has happened to unemployment and general economic indicators. So with that, you say, what was the capacity of 18,000 naira minimum wage in 2011, and can it do the same in 2019? Your guess would be as good as mine. Perhaps not. So the question will be, how do we compensate labor so that what labor earned in 2011 could perhaps do almost the same thing with what is going to earn in 2019, as the case may be. So the closest example is 2 bags of rice was equivalent of 18,000 naira in 2011. In 2019, however, 30,000 might not be able to buy exactly 2 bags of rice, or if you are choosing some brands, you might still be able to get 2 bags of rice for 30,000 naira. And if you look at it over the years, Nigerian government have benchmarked minimum wage from administration to administration from early 70s on $100 to workers' minimum wage. So $100 will give you about 36 if you are looking at import-export window. And if you are looking at CBN official figure, you'll be looking at maybe 30,500 naira, so which is not far from 500 naira. And I guess this is where the federal government and labor is coming from, that if you cannot give us the full compensation or increase, as it were, but you should earn the real value of minimum wage.
Paul, I like that, Paul.
Should it be price mechanism or should it be economic performance?
Okay.
But we need to choose.
Okay, we need to choose, Paul, and that's breaking it down a little bit for everyone to understand how we arrive at where we are today, because it's always sometimes when you want to go ahead, you need to look back. That's why in this business, you do what you call a 5-year, 10-year historical review of a company or a government, whatever it is, to find out where you are in terms of performance. That's so that you have a look ahead, but first you need to look back. So if we peg this at $100, who pegged it? Why is it not $200? Why do we use a foreign currency as a basis of a benchmark for payment of minimum wage in Nigeria?
Yes, because most of the time our currency fluctuates. And if you look at what currency was from 1973 to date, what 1 naira could buy then is equivalent of 1.75 cents could buy then. Right now, we need about 305 naira. So because economic performance has really not been very interesting over the years, perhaps because of our over-reliance on crude oil and over-reliance on few other commodities, it has impacted negatively on economic activity. But I need to put a caveat. It does not mean that government, as the case may be, necessarily wants the value of naira to depreciate. Perhaps it's the function of policy. because the suit you put on and the one I'm putting on in Abuja are perhaps both imported. All of these have implication on marginal propensity to import. The more commodity that you import to your country, the more you are demanding for dollars. And you are demanding for dollars even though the commodity is coming from Ghana, or is coming from Asia, or as the continent, or is coming from Europe, or any country, or any continent in the world other than your country. You will necessarily be demanding for that hard currency. When you demand for hard currency, one of the globally recognized currencies, international currency, is the US dollar. So the best way to compensate labor or to determine price that labor will earn over a 5 years period is to look at what is $100 as at today's figure. Then you can compensate
I like that.
labor back.
Yes, I like that.
That should be the earnings people should earn. It's just the baseline figure that people should earn.
Yes, Paul, I like that.
Private sector, I emphasize, and public sector.
Yes, because if you take $100, and I mean in the greenback in 1973, and you fast track that to 2018 or 2019, it's not the same $100. Even the US dollar has gained over those decades. So even if you use dollar for dollar without any exchange rate, whatever, naira to dollar or dollar to naira, whatever, dollar for dollar is not the same $100 in 1973 as $100 as at today. So we need to go back to the fundamental of how we arrive at the baseline of minimum wage setting. Yes,
I agree with you completely. But that is the fairest way because of the kind of economy that we run. This is not the same for what takes place in China, because China is exposed to perhaps the rest of the world. So it's not the same thing with what happened in Canada. It's not the same thing with what happened in the United Kingdom. It's not the same. But because of the economy that we run, we are perhaps monocultural, monoproduct in nature. So we just need to rely on what is the easiest. And you see, many countries are not using, I'll give you another example, are not using gross domestic product to measure their total economic monetary value. But Nigeria, we use that because it brings some sort of confusion in accounting, in economic accounting, when you use other figures other than gross domestic product. So this is perhaps what is the most convenient. It does not mean that we cannot look at it. And I think it's not the best. The best would have been to look at the performance, average performance, how much of education have impacted on our people, so that the forces of demand and supply, which is the ultimate goal, price mechanism, could determine what should be the least pay for anyone who is qualified and willing to work in our country.
Okay, so if we're using our GDP performance, then we went into recession just a few years ago, then we're climbing out of recession, as it were. So if we look at the economic performance of the country, look at the size of our GDP, look at our per capita, whatever, oil exports, do you think we have what it takes at all levels, including local governments, to pay 30,000 naira as a minimum wage?
Yes, on the surface, the answer will be no, but when you look deeply, the answer will be a capital yes. I'll give you an instance. What we are generating in value-added tax today is so small, not because the figure is 5%, because we have not automated our remittance system. Countries that don't have the kind of size that Nigeria has more revenue coming from value-added tax compared to what we have. And know that the figures, the revenue generated from value-added tax will have impact not just on federal government, but on state government. So perhaps if this is done, based on the research our organization have done, government will earn over 300% of what is earning today. I mean 300% of what government is earning today. That will have direct impact on state government. So that the money is there, apart from cutting costs, because cutting costs is what must happen. If government truly want to pay minimum wage, then everybody will have to tighten belt this time. And this time, the person that will lead the belt tightening will be state government and some other government. If you tighten your belt and cut costs, then you will have enough revenue or some revenue to pay labor. No, but for all of this not to happen in the coming future, I think government government will now need to pay attention. When I say government, I mean federal, state, and local government, to pay attention to what other countries that were in our situation have done before. China was in a similar situation, and India in the 80s, but they realized that for their country not to be made up in economic quagmire, what was needed at that point was to go into manufacturing. So China went into manufacturing of some sort, and because of that, China first understood that there is need for them to fix infrastructure, which includes power supply, roads, rail, etc., etc. The question you will ask me is that how will Nigeria even generate revenue to fix rail, to fix road, and so on and so forth? We've mentioned time and again that any government that wants to develop Nigeria beyond growth now, I'm talking about development, we need to tie all infrastructure fund into oil revenue. That is, the last copper generated from oil should go directly into infrastructure. I know government will need to run, then you can use taxes, you can use other things to run government. When you do this, we are going to have a speedy rate in the, we're going to have a speedy growth, I beg your pardon, in the rate of development of the country. So when you go into manufacturing, then you can have rail to connect Lagos to Sokoto, to connect Calabar to Maiduguri. We have rail that will perform. I understand government have been engaging on rail from time to time, but generally, what is limiting government as of today has been revenue. And revenue has been what has been limiting government. Even when we said Nigeria generated $120 per barrel from crude oil. What was the worth of crude oil? 120 barrels. How much do we sell an iPhone? What is the cost of an iPhone? What is the cost of iPad? What is the cost of check all those phones. It is about 10 barrels of crude oil. So, but we want to sell crude oil and believe that we will generate revenue from that. Of course, it does not work. First, government should understand that diversification should happen from primary sector to secondary sector or tertiary sector. We cannot diversify from primary sector to another primary sector, agriculture. Agriculture is good, mark you, it's a good thing to do, but it should not be the core point of diversification.